Well, hey everyone, how's it going? Miles Shank here, and today is kind of a part 2 / more comprehensive look at Steadicam, camera build, and kind of what you need to know being a first AC, a second AC, and we'll even have some questions that we're taking from directors. Basically, I put that first video out, and after maybe a year or so that it's been up, I've gotten so many more great questions in the comments below and like over Instagram and just kind of on set from other people. And I've heard that people are sending that video to other first ACs just to kind of get them up to speed, working with the Steadicam operator. So let's do a better, maybe more comprehensive deep dive into this today. Okay, so let's say you've had your prep day, or maybe you're on your prep day, and you're able to either prep with the Steadicam op. You might be over the phone. A lot of times I'm on a Zoom call or phone or something like that with an AC, and they're just kind of showing me the rig, and I can kind of point to this and point to that. We talked about cables being tied down and tight. That's great, but what about logistically? How about if we have shots that are tripod, and then the next scene is on steady, and then we go back to tripod or a dolly? What do those changeovers look like? So that's something you want to discuss with your Steadicam operator. There's two great options that I like to use. We have what's called an SOS plate, steady on sticks. Most Steadicam operators have this. Don't assume that they always do, so I would maybe ask. Something that I've liked as an alternative are these plates. These are Sackler standard size. I believe Small Rig makes these. A couple different companies make variations of these. I think you can get these in O'Connor standard size too, so very popular tripods, Sackler and O'Connor. These are great. Steady on sticks is fantastic. Typically it's a plate that will lock in and then it slides forward and back. These I like a lot because we have, the EVF, might have like a 7-inch monitor, it's rigged up how the cinematographer wants to shoot that day on tripod. And then we kind of have a game plan that, okay, next shot is on sticks. So we know to take the monitor, probably on a quick release, we'll take that off. Probably slide the whole handle off with the EVF and all that. Make it pretty clean. Then you clip it in, find your balance, all that stuff. Then whenever you're going back and forth and you strip those things off and you put it back on, it's really close. So then typically you have these dials on the side, which I'll cover here. And you just kind of tweak those in, and it's a really quick way to go steady to stick. So typically that's what I like to do on set. If you see me look at my phone a lot, it's because I have a lot of kind of questions and answers that we've talked about through some Facebook groups, through Instagram, and of course through comments in the last video. So let's say, we want to talk about removing bridge plates if we can. So if you have like a shoulder pad or something like that, a lot of the airy plates will have kind of built-in shoulder pads, but you don't really notice as like an AC. I mean, those are great if you're going to go handheld, but as a Steadicam op, you always want that center of gravity really close to the top stage. And essentially you want all your weight as close as this gimbal as you can, because the more weight you add on the top, the more weight or at least length you're gonna have to add down here. So also before you get on set, you wanna talk about, particularly if you're shooting outdoors, what do we do for weather? Are we gonna hang an umbrella over the whole cart? Are we gonna leave the camera in the sled in the sun? Like they do, like a lot of my AC friends will have tarps or like kind of thing, like heat reflective tarps, I guess, I don't know. They keep the sun off of it. So, if you're taking 10-minute break or lunch or something like that, but also for rain, if you're shooting and all of a sudden a drizzle becomes a downpour, you want to be able to like get on there and have some kind of a game plan on like, do we have cover for this thing? Or are we just going to throw a tarp on it, wait it out? What does that look like? One more thing that we'll cover here in just a little bit is power distribution. I typically like to work, and this is just me, I like to just tell the ACs to, hey, go ahead and do everything on top of the stage is all yours. On top of the top stage is yours. So let's go ahead and power via batteries, and then if you have a shark fin or something, you want to hot swap, that's fantastic. A lot of people I work with will, plug in with like a D-tap connector, keep power to the camera while they change over. It's a quick way to hot swap. Sometimes, oftentimes, I will power from the sled and into the camera, but we'll have a battery as well. So then if we need to hot swap, we can just push my cable into the pins, and then it draws power from the sled, and then we can swap the battery and change that out. Sometimes I will, if it's a larger build and I need to shed some weight off of it, I will just power directly off the sled. So you might want to check with your Steadicam ops and see if you're considering that route, and then if they also have the power cables for whatever camera you're using. And on that note, it's a great time to ask if you have a second AC, you might want to have that second AC running batteries or media. So then if you do have the first AC who's pulling focus, making marks, checking the gate, checking lenses, that your second AC is also kind of filling in those cracks and kind of helping the first throughout the whole day. But that's a whole separate video and a whole separate discussion. So one thing I realized, a lot of ACs, when they're starting out in particular, they maybe haven't worked with Steadicam before, which is probably why you're watching this video. So something that we need to talk about now is just gear. Like what does that look like? Should you touch the Steadicam gear? What is this sled all about? You know, like if I touch this, will it break? There's so many questions you could be asking right now. So let's go ahead and mount the camera to the Steadicam and talk about some parts of it here. And with that, we have our top stage plate on the bottom of the camera, secured with 2 3/8 screws, so that thing's not going anywhere. 15mm rails on here. So we're gonna mount this on. And so that sound takes us to the first thing that we're gonna talk about here. That is the sound of the camera locking in, just like a tripod. Swing our safety lever over. And now this sled is the Steadicam M1. It's pretty common. You might even more commonly see the M2. They're very similar sleds. I think the M1 has a higher weight capacity, but the main difference is that you have this little box up here. This is the control box for the volt. The M1 and M2 are really well known for the volt. Now the volt is this whole little system here. Now this is a pretty beefy looking gimbal. It's been out for a few years now, so you've probably seen it on set. So the volt has motors, and these motors allow the Steadicam operator to probably most widely used is to control the horizon. So you can actually lock your horizon and set that in. And if you're doing work on stairs, or if you need to keep the camera tilted at a certain axis, there's like a little mode button on here that you can lock at different angles and keep your camera balanced all throughout. And so now that we're locked in, let's throw our SDI into the back of the camera. Now I typically just do like a SDI 2. Now this sled actually has a low mode monitor and a high mode monitor, and we'll talk about that in just a second. I'm going to connect my low mode cable here into the side of the tear deck. So I've just turned our cart sideways to give you a better view here and dropped us back down to kind of like a working height. Now again, this is the M1, so the biggest differentiating factor is really the volt control box being on the outside. Super easy way to recognize it from an M2, which again would have these controls integrated into the top stage. You can actually take this off too, which is kind of a nice thing about the M1. So you do have, well I should say, with the M1 and M2 sleds, not all sleds, will have DTAP power. You might have tally light power or like 12 or 24 volt, like this sled can do 12 and 24 volts. So you do have a couple of options if you need to power something via LEMO or DTAP. On here I have my low mode monitor. We have the post. Now this is obviously the core of the Steadicam, very original name, the post. Now this is the volt we were talking about. This has motors in it and electronics, so it's great not to get this wet. So if you are filming and you have some drizzle or some rain coming down, keep that in mind. The Steadicam op almost certainly will have weather gear with them, but it is nice if you're in a pinch to grab a roll of gaff tape and bags or whatever you can and just cover electronics. Essentially, it's like a camera. You know, if water gets in there, it's not going to be good. So I actually had a friend have their whole rig sprayed with a bottle of champagne that the director didn't tell them the talent was going to be popping champagne all over the camera, and it shorted out his monitor, unfortunately. I believe he had a backup, the director replaced it, but if there's going to be flying liquids, it's just like something else you might want to talk about and cover too. So down here we have our yoke, our monitor yoke. This is just a 5-inch ultra bright, 5-inch ultra brights up here. This is your 703 ultra bright from Small HD down here. And then on the bottom here we have our toe box. This has some various electronic plugs into it, and then we have SDI signals out. Let's jump into balancing. You know, this is the thing that people get nervous about, can take some time, but an experienced op can do it pretty quickly. Oh yeah, here we go. So this is something too, this is called your forks. This is like just a mount, obviously for your Steadicam. The M1 has like a safety on it, which swings out, and now the sled is actually free. They'll have a pin or something in there typically, so if you're the one putting the sled on, make sure there's some kind of a safety and that you just don't have like an opening in the forks that this thing could just fall out of. This is not the official way to do this. Every op might do it a little differently. I just typically put my kind of leg under it here, take the weight, and then it's not on my back. Everything is attached, and this particular gimbal, you're going to do what's called a zero balance. So most sleds have drop time. Now drop time is about this 90-degree swing. And typically you want to count 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000. And that's kind of like a healthy drop time. So if you see Steadicam up, I might even turn the gimbal off sometimes, the volt off, and do a traditional drop time with, you know, different configurations. All right, to save time in the video, I went ahead and balanced. But what we did was, did a zero balance, just kind of a neutral balance here. So, you know, if you just like tap it, you'll see it move. It's very finely tuned, which again can take a little bit of time. And again, this is more things that I try to save time on whenever we're doing a steady to tripod changeovers. Like I said, I like to use those little bridge plates that I have because when you snap back in, you're pretty close to where you were before if you take everything off. So that's what I like to have. So this brings me to another good point. If you, which typically you're going to be using maybe ND filters or, you know, glimmer glass or there's some kind of filtration, remember that everything you put in here, you should be ready to shoot. You should be ready to push the button before the Steadicam op balances. So make sure sound department has all of their equipment on here that we need, even down to the mag. Go ahead and put your mag or your card in the camera. Lens caps are off, and if, you know, it kind of changes things because the DP needs to see the shot really before they go filtration, most likely. So you probably want to have your filter in here. Remember too, if you're changing filters, that you're going to pull one, and now all of a sudden your weight changes. It changes quite a bit for just a piece of glass. So that's something to consider. It doesn't typically take a lot of rebalance time. Like usually if you pull that, now I'll bring it back to zero bounce to show you the difference of one filter. It's pretty drastic sometimes. So, you know, I would probably have to push this back down a little bit and maybe tweak the dial a little bit there. So pretty quick changeovers all in all. But just keep that in mind. If you're going to be changing lenses, most lenses are within ounces from each other. Some, you know, if you're going from like a telephoto something to a wide angle something, it's probably going to be a little bit of changeover time. Most gimbals are the same, and yeah, if you're going to be changing filters, you might just want to have like a clear glass. If you know you're going to be using, like, you know, you're going to be shooting glimmer over here, and then when we go back here, we're going to be just clean. Then, you know, just like a clear glass filter. It might be nice just to pop in. Also protect the lens from flying champagne if you have that happening. Here's one thing I love about the Volt is the changeover from high to low mode is about that fast. Like you can change over very quickly. So you will see here we have our controls. Without getting too nitty gritty into this, when you turn on the Volt, if you align it with your post here, it'll correct the horizon, yep, like that. So now the great thing is, like, if I'm pushing on it or the wind is blowing it, then it really fights back to hold that horizon. And you can actually, the Steadicam op can use these dials on the side and actually tune it in, like the sharpness of it. So this is when I would use a low mode monitor, and this is why I like having the ultra bright 5-inch and the ultra bright 7-inch. They're basically the same. I pretty much have the quick keys all set up on them. It's one thing you want to ask your Steadicam operator is, especially with two SDI outs, is do they want a clean feed? So sometimes I don't want to see your ISO and your focal length and all the gack on the sides of the image. It could be nice just to send one clean feed, and then I typically just stick crosshairs on the image just to give me center point, and then just a nice clean image sometimes is just a little less distracting and really helps me to focus like on the image when I'm operating. And now we're gonna go back on the forks. So one thing I love when ACs do this is if I have the camera in my hands like that and the AC is already flipping that around for me, oh, it's amazing. So always remember to keep the forks facing out, so the sled post and all that can go right in here. Just keep in mind that your Steadicam op will most likely, if they have their arm on, they're going to be holding it while trying to push. So if a first or second AC can grab the stand or the cart and kind of take that with them. This is like kind of a nice setup to do it on the cart because we have our monitor and Terra deck for first AC like kind of on it here. A lot of firsts like to work on their own stand. It's totally fine. Good time for a second, help push, and also a great time to grab a drink if you need. Your Steadicam op's probably going to be sweating, so here we'll come back on the arm. I've noticed that a lot of first ACs feel maybe embarrassed to ask about the sled, like they maybe have never worked with a Steadicam op before, so they just really want to know like all the different parts of it and all that and how it works. And it's I don't know, it's kind of like learning a camera. Like there's of course a lot of technology and all that on like a lot of the newer sleds, but really it's not too intimidating once you're like up and working with it. Just keep in mind your Steadicam op is a human, so if you're a DP particularly or a director and you want to find the shot, I know you got to find the shot sometimes, but just notice that your Steadicam op is like maybe just standing here holding this and waiting as you look at a monitor with your latte. So there's something to keep in mind is you might be burning through your operator's energy just by holding this thing. And then after you're lighting it for 3 to 5 minutes or whatever, and then you're like, okay, let's get up and do a take. And all of a sudden, like, it's like, oh my gosh, like your operator's tired now. So keep that in mind. Typically I like to leave it on the forks and keep it pointed in the direction and see if they can light to that. If it is a specific move, I understand like, you'll want to run through and do some takes and see the light and all that. So just keep in mind if you're gonna be a director or a cinematographer and you have to get your gaffer to move a light or this or that. If it's more than like a quick little 10-30 second kind of thing, like maybe be like, okay, go post up and get your Steadicam a drink or like a little break. So one great thing to do for an AC is two great things. Is one, if you see this getting flipped, go ahead and point the forks at the operator. So then, we finish and we do a take, you're sweating, big one or whatever it is. You come up, you can just come and dock, swing your safety, and then come off. Another great thing that I run into often, actually, more often than I like to admit, is you're gonna have your cart in the room, maybe frame up, light it, but then your cart will get pushed into the corner, and your AC is also back there in the corner, and pull and focus, whatever. And then you have like your clients or a director or whoever, or hair and makeup or whoever, just like kind of milling around in the background, getting out of the way, which is great. But then the cart gets like kind of buried back in this corner, and there might be like 4 people standing in front. And as an operator, you just did this take maybe 17 times. I don't know, like, you might be tired coming off of it. Your legs are like, oh my gosh, like just picture being in the gym for 10 to 12 hours straight, lifting 45 pounds, 35 pounds, whatever your rig is that day. And you're just like desperate to get this thing off, basically, like after a take. So then you're like trying to get back to your forks. I love it when an AC or somebody at least is just like, hey guys, can we clear space for camera to get back, and that's often you can just say, hey, camera coming through, and kind of push back. So that is very humane, and it's great to help them out. All right, so as we take this off, let's talk about things, gear, what to touch, what not to touch. There's really no like yes and no definites. It really comes down to the person who is operating. Typically, I won't just be like, take this, like I'm not typically throwing my gear on people. I will, wrangle my own gear, maybe bring it in, open up cases myself, build the rig. I typically like to do that myself. Like I said, some old school guys will expect their ACs to build. Again, I'd probably want to make sure like if you do have to build your rig, make sure you get some quality time with the Steadicam op, and spend some time on prep day, get that figured out, how to exactly do that. To me, I think it's just easier if like the operator does it. It's usually a little bit quicker. And I know most ops that I know will set up their own gear. Quick peek underneath of the cart. What we have down here, we have a case full of batteries because there's a lot of weight hanging off the side of this. And I've heard stories of carts flipping with larger rigs. That can't be good. So I always have like a minimum of like, a few batteries, charger setup or something down here that just kind of adds some weight to it. I have like a bag over here of tools, Allen keys, various things that we need to fix if, or adjust anything. Also, I have on here is a 15-pound sandbag. Don't always have it. It's very nice to have. If you don't own one, don't have one, then maybe ask your grip, if they, like a grip department, if they have just a 15-20 pound sandbag, something like that you can use to help offset that weight, especially if you're going to be moving with your company moves, things shift. So keep that in mind, particularly if no one's around this cart, and you're docking. Anyway, yeah, on hills, all that stuff. So just wrapping up, I had a few points that I didn't quite know how to connect and just wanted to answer those. So one question was, what do I touch? What do I not touch as a first AC, as a second AC? And I would just ask your Steadicam op, just, hey, like, you got your batteries going. Do you want me to set up a charging station for you? Would you like me to cycle through those for you? And of course, before you take batteries off of the sled, I would just ask, like maybe he's got it bounced up or she's got it bounced up, and they, might not have matching batteries. Typically, a Steadicam op will have like 4, 6, or 8 of the same batteries so that they can just keep swapping those. This sled is hot swappable, which is great, but also you might want to ask, is it hot swappable so that I don't just shut your whole sled down by changing these? And another great question is, how do you handle teleprompters? Now, teleprompters are kind of a business of their own. We've all done the corporate shoots, and sometimes you probably couldn't get like an eye direct on here, but a teleprompter for sure. I have flown quite a few times, and that is something where I said, like, it's great to have an assortment of rails, maybe some 3s, some 6s, some 8s, or you can grab some longer ones if you need to. It really depends on the prompter. Nobody really loves iPad prompters. Steadicam ops like them because they're lighter and they're easier to fly. I know clients don't really love it, so typically you'll want some wireless setup. If it's not an iPad prompter, then you'll be using a company that is a prompter, prompter professionals. That, you might just make sure that they don't have tethered cables or something that is going to be hanging or dangling off of you. Somebody will need to be back there wrangling. It's great to have just wireless feed, that they can just do everything, over there in the corner, and they don't need to keep coming up here and poking and changing and doing all the stuff onto your sled. Even if you have like one of those cloth donuts, if it's shifted forward, if it's shifted all the way to the back of the lens. For a teleprompting rig, you may have an eye light of some kind on here. So that's something where I have D-taps on my sled. Sometimes they will want to draw power off of, if not the camera rig itself, maybe if I can supply them something to keep the power to their prompter, then they don't need to put more batteries on it. So something else to consider. Okay, so we have another question here from Ben. Do you see a world where Trinity takes over? Now, if you don't know, you probably know, but the Trinity, it's made by Airy. It's a great tool, fantastic tool. It is a different tool that can do similar shots. It can do the same thing, kind of, but for some purposes, a Steadicam is just better. With teleprompting, which we just talked about, I haven't seen a Trinity teleprompter setup. I imagine that would be a pretty long and heavy, cumbersome kind of camera rig to do a Trinity teleprompter. The nice thing about Steady is you can build it, you can fly it. Any size, shape camera. I mean, people have put IMAX cameras on the M1, so you can really do a lot of different configurations with it. Trinity is a great tool for, more complex shots, going through like a car window or over a table or something like that. It's fantastic. If you need to come off of like a ground height to overhead height, that's your tool. If you need to do 360s, the Trinity 2 is fantastic because that can actually do 360 rolls. Trinity 1 can't. But you also can get attachments on here like a cyclo that can also rotate the camera full 360. Or also you have the skater scope now, which has internal optics that flip, so you can actually flip a whole image without actually rotating the camera at all.
One, action.
Sometimes the Steadicam is just like, it has more of that like real, like organic kind of feel to it. It's narrow for going through hallways and doorways. It's shorter. I don't own a Trinity as of the recording of this. I've thought about getting the Trinity 2, maybe, but they're very different tools. I would still keep my Steadicam if I bought a Trinity tomorrow. We have another question about spotting. So particularly if you're a second AC, what do you do if a Steadicam op asks you to spot them, or if someone's asking you to spot them? So grabbing my vest here, when you're spotting, you typically want to like grab them, your Steadicam op, maybe up on the shoulder, or the exo vest is great because you don't have to grab their sweaty vest. You can just grab a rail, and essentially they're going to be moving the camera. They're going to be moving themselves. But if you are, maybe guiding them, you probably don't want to pull or push them. Nobody's going to love that. So if you are spotting somebody and there's like a cable or something on the floor that you might trip and fall. Imagine like you're just walking backwards, often looking at the screen, looking down at your feet, trying to watch where you're going. But if there's like a step, let's say we're coming up on a step, you would want to like, maybe quietly say it so the camera doesn't pick up, like, hey, step, and they know to like step up. If they are going to bump a wall, maybe you kind of give them a nudge in the direction, you kind of learn like a second language with the operator, and kind of nudges and pushes and pulls and little things. But yeah, you probably don't want to be like moving them. Like, I don't think anybody would like them to be shoved in a direction because they are operating a camera, a heavy camera often, and they want to be free to make moves and all that. So also to not really get in the way if they are moving left or moving right. If you feel them move, let them move. But if they're gonna hit a pole or a wall or something, that could cause them to trip and fall, or get hurt in some way. Like, you want to give them a little hard stop. You want to make sure that they don't get injured. I hope this video has been helpful to you. We could have talked about so many more things. First and second ACs. If you're first time starting out, just ask questions. You won't get in trouble for asking questions, really. But you don't want to pretend to know and have no clue. So get more resources like this video. You can feel free to ask questions below or reach out to me on Instagram. It's a great way, faster way probably, to reach me if you have questions. But really just talk to your Steadicam ops. Communication is the key to success. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.